Well, just a couple of days ago, we lost the last of the classic Universal monsters. We lost Mr. Ricou Browning. Well, Mr. Browning was always flattered to have his name mentioned in the same sentence as other actors like Bela Lugosi or Boris Karloff, to have his Gill-Man included in the pantheon of classic monster movies from the classic Universal cycle. He always appreciated that. He said in many interviews over the years that he found it flattering and even humbling. And really, he was the last of the classic Universal monsters. We really don't have any others left, unfortunately. And that's one of the things about being a fan of these types of movies. If our heroes are around anymore, we know our time is limited. And Mr. Browning made it possible for so many fans to interact with him and express their appreciation because he was a regular on the convention circuit. I met him in various conventions all across the country. I met him at Crypticon Seattle. I met him at Monster Bash in Pennsylvania. He would do the rounds. He did a lot of things in Florida, which was his home state, his home base. And, he just made himself available to so many fans. I went through my archives over at my podcast at Monster Kid Radio to see if I had any real interviews with Mr. Browning. And, well, it turns out I really didn't have all that many. That's not to say that I didn't have interactions with the man. They were wonderful. The guy was so nice. But in terms of actual recordings, I'm kind of kicking myself now for not having many more of them. But I do have one from a previous Crypticon Seattle convention. I'm going to play that at the end of this. I want to say, though, that Mr. Browning means a lot, or meant a lot. I guess he still continues to mean a lot to me, because Creature from the Black Lagoon, it is my favorite film of all time. Anyone who ever listens to me for more than a few minutes whenever we start talking about movies will know that Creature from the Black Lagoon is my favorite film. And part of the reason for that is because the monster is so iconic. Yes, the suit does most of the work, but the man in the suit made it move, brought it to life, gave it a sense of grace and savagery when needed. It was amazing, and I think most monster kids know that Mr. Browning was the underwater monster, that there was always somebody else who played the land-based version of the creature. But Mr. Browning, as a diver, as an accomplished swimmer, man, he brought that creature to life, and it was amazing. But that's not all he did. He was a stunt guy. He did tons of stunts. He designed tons of stunts. And he did some non-monstrous things, like co-creating Flipper and Salty. Now, Salty I don't know nearly as much about, but Flipper, and that played on Nick at Night and those other types of channels that were on when I was a kid. So, I was kind of sort of aware of Mr. Browning without really being aware of Mr. Browning, since he had created Flipper, and I think that's pretty special as well. To have something that had that kind of lifespan and longevity and the ability to connect to kids and audiences through multiple generations, not just in the monster movie genre, but in family entertainment and things along those lines as well. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Mr. No Legs, which admittedly is not the... You know what? I'm not even going to say that, because I find the movie incredibly entertaining. And, as some of my friends have pointed out to me over the years, the only time a movie is a bad movie is if it's a boring movie. And Mr. No Legs never bores me. Mr. No Legs is a cop, drama, action thing. It's admittedly low budget, but it stars John Agar. I'd like to relate to you a conversation that I had with Mr. Browning, probably the last conversation I ever had with the man. I try to make it a point whenever I go to a horror convention or any of these events and an icon is there. Maybe it's cliche at this point to say this or suggest this, but I always want to try to bring up something that not every other person is going to bring up in line. There's always a line to meet these people. For example, at a Horror Hound weekend, I went to go meet George Romero, and everybody was there to talk about the zombie stuff. And I love the zombie stuff too, and this is not me putting on an act or anything to try to get into his good graces or whatever, but I told him my favorite movie of his is Night Riders. And I didn't think a lot of people would be talking about Night Riders, so, I had a chance to kind of talk to him about that. So I tried to do the same thing with Mr. Browning. I asked him about Mr. No Legs. Have you seen Mr. No Legs? If you haven't seen Mr. No Legs, here's a taste.
You are about to see scenes from an unusual film about an amazing man.
blame Andy for not wanting to take a leave of absence, can we, sir?
Well, under the circumstances, would you?
Not until after I got to kill her, sir.
I'm not going to subject you to the entire trailer, but it's a pretty unique movie. And when I asked Mr. Browning about it, he smiled, he shook his head, he lowered his face, and said, "Nobody got paid on that movie." I wish I had recorded that, but, like I said, I do have a recording that I did with him many years ago at a Crypticon Seattle that I'm going to play here in a moment. Thank you, Mr. Browning, for the hours of entertainment that you've given me as a monster kid with the movies that you've been involved with. Whether it's something like the Creature from the Black Lagoon films, Mr. No Legs, Island Claws, any of the other movies that you were involved with, either behind the scenes or in front of the camera in some way. Thank you. And thank you for spending thousands of more hours with us fans who wanted to talk to you about anything, whether it's Creature from the Black Lagoon, Mr. No Legs, or maybe even the time you spent working on some James Bond movies, working on underwater stunts. Wherever you are now, Mr. Browning, this monster kid owes you a debt. Thank you so much. And fellow fans, fellow monster kids, whether you're part of Generation X or any other generation, if you're a fan of these movies, and you do have an opportunity to meet your heroes at these conventions, please take a moment to let them know how much they mean to you. I know that Mr. Browning, toward the ends of his life, was continuing to do convention appearances as best as he could, and I'm sure he appreciated all the positive interactions he had with all of us fans. Mr. Browning, rest in peace, and thank you. So you are the creator of Flipper, the director of Mr. No Legs, but I know you as the Gill Man. How's it going?
Good, thank you very much. I didn't know people remembered Mr. No Leg.
It's got John Agar in it, so we've got you and John Agar. So we got some B-movie legends involved.
He was a super guy.
Yeah?
Easy to work with, and his wife was great. He loved boxing, and I loved boxing. He used to go to boxing night.
Oh, wow. So I need to be on my best behavior then, basically? But because people know you as the Gill Man, I mean, how many people have come up to you today talking about Creature from the Black Lagoon?
Quite a few, but that's all I've got is creature pictures.
Which is my favorite movie of all time, so I don't mind.
Wonderful. Glad you enjoyed it.
Now, you played the creature in the underwater scenes, and you were the creature in all 3 films underwater?
Correct.
And if I remember correctly, were you originally cast for the second film for the underwater stuff?
No, I wasn't.
So, what happened there?
Well, I can't tell you everything that happened, but they called me and said, "We need you." And I said, "Okay, we'll then do another creature film." And I said, "Well, do you want me to come out and get fitted for an outfit?" And they said, "No, we were down in Marineland shooting." And I said, "Wow." And so I went down there, and they cut up the other suit from the other guy and made it fit me, and I did the show in that suit.
Yeah. What is your favorite memory of working on all these creature films?
Money. Just go there.
Before, during, or after?
Well, all during and after. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a good show.
Thanks.